Hi, and welcome to Montgomery Public Schools Education Roundtable. I'm Tom Salter. We don't actually have a round table, but we have with us today Dr. Ann Roy Moore, who is the superintendent of Montgomery Public Schools, and we're so pleased to have you here today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. Thanks for making time in your oh so busy schedule. My office is just down the hall from yours, but you are always running. I never know where you're going to be, always at a school or doing things. You have a lot of energy.
Well, that's good for a person my age.
We won't tell them how old you are. We'll just say you're over 16. How's that?
That sounds great.
Fantastic. Well, you have been you began as the interim superintendent for a few months, and then you got the interim removed from your name. But this isn't your first rodeo in terms of education. Tell us a little bit about your background and your history.
All right, well, of course, I started out in education as a teacher. I worked with young children, pre-K. Then I taught kindergarten for several years, taught second and fifth grade for several years, and then at some point became what they call a curriculum person. And I worked in the curriculum area with federal programs, actually. And back then, of course, Title I is what it was called, and it changed, and now it's back to Title I again. And then I was a principal in an elementary school, and from there I became what we call the manager of elementary ed, which is like a director.
Right.
And so I did that in Huntsville for about 28 elementary schools. And then I became an assistant superintendent and a deputy superintendent and then superintendent. So
and you've not just in Huntsville, you've also worked in Florence, and you've worked in some colleges as well.
Right. I spent some time in Florence, about 7 years as the assistant superintendent. And but most of my career was in Huntsville. I've been an adjunct at several universities, Alabama A&M, University of North Alabama. I worked in some junior colleges, Shoals Community College, places like that. So I've had a pretty good variety of experiences.
Now we have to educate people and let them know it's not Muscle Shoals, it's Mush Shoals.
Okay.
and it's a Sherfield,
Okay.
right? Isn't that the way everybody
Okay,
says
yeah.
it? I lived up there for a little while.
Yeah, I grew up in that area, actually, in the Florence area. That's where I grew up.
It's a great little area. But we're glad you're here in our great little area. Of the things you mentioned, being a principal, being a teacher, working with different age groups, being a curriculum specialist, and of course being a superintendent, of those things that you've done in education, what has been the most challenging to you?
Well, you know, I've always been in the classroom because of the diversity that you find in your individual students. That's always a big challenge, but because I love being with kids, it wasn't that big of a deal. But, you know, you were always constantly every day trying to figure out how to enhance the educational process for every child that was in the classroom. And so that could be very challenging. I was much younger then, and so I had a lot of energy, and so I felt up to the task. Then moving from the classroom into administration, that in itself is a challenge because you have to see things from a different perspective. But I always found it really great to be able to reflect on the different areas that I had experience in, from teaching to being a school administrator to being a curriculum person, that those experiences actually helped me make the right decision, I hope, most of the time as I moved up through the ranks.
When you mentioned the challenges of diversity, but you're not talking about like racial, you're talking about the experience of the child, is that right?
That, you know, children coming from different backgrounds. I worked with really low income kids, and then I worked with children who were from parents who had lots of money. And so, but they all have issues that you have to deal with. They're just different issues. And of course, one time when I was teaching a kindergarten class, I actually had 5 different languages in my class.
Wow.
I kind of asked my principal, why'd you give me all the kids who speak a different language other than English? That made 6.
Sure, yeah.
And so she said, well, you know, I think you can handle it. And it was okay.
Yeah.
But I just depended on the children in the class to help me out. And so it worked really well.
Well, that's certainly good experience. I mean, in Montgomery Public Schools, I can't remember off the top of my head, what do we have, like 40 or 50 different languages?
Yeah, it's
that
up there now, maybe even 60.
Yeah, it's quite a few.
Yeah.
And we have one of our challenges, speaking of challenges, is that when it comes to ESL, English Second Language, I think is what they're calling it now, we don't have enough teachers who speak multiple languages. That's just hard to find, isn't it?
Right, and for you to have so many, I mean, with English language learners, I think is what we call them now. So they're learning English, but they speak at home. They may speak another language altogether, and their parents may speak another language. And so we kind of immerse them in the English language, but we also have to help them make that transition from their language, their home language, to what we do at school.
And one of the things we do to help with that is provide many of our materials, like our code of conduct and those type of forms and those things, in multiple languages, Korean, Spanish, and a couple others, to
Right.
help those parents who don't speak as much English as the rest of the population does. Well, every time I interview an educator, I guess, the thing that they seem to all have in common is it's not the summers off that some teachers get. It's not the pay, certainly, that most educators get, but it's that light that goes on in a kid's eye when they finally get it. Talk a little bit about the rewards of being an educator.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to really love the teaching aspect of being an educator, because that's what makes the light go off, and it's like that's your reward, that's your motivation as a teacher, to see children who come in at one level, and when they leave you, they're at another level, and you see that growth over time, over a period of, say, 9 months. You see that growth. And if you're in a school where you're able to stay 5 or 6 years, say in an elementary school, you're able to see them come in kindergarten, and you see them when they leave in 5th grade or 6th grade, and you see the growth that they've attained over time, and it's a really great feeling, and that's what makes you want to keep coming back. And I'm sure it's the same feeling in high school when you work with students. You do see them grow and mature over time, and you do see them master certain concepts, and so it makes you feel really good, and you think at the end of a year, you think, I'm not going to do this anymore, this is it, I've had it. And then you get recharged a little bit during the summer break, and then you come back and you're ready to roll again.
But there is actually, in a lot of kids, especially the younger kids, a physical reaction to learning. Their eyes get brighter, and there's a little spark, and they sit up straighter when they finally get a concept, and that has to be, I taught a little bit in college, but I've never taught younger grades, but that has to be the kind of the biggest pat on the back when you physically see that child react that way.
Right, and I think probably as an educator, that's pretty much all you need. A lot of times you say, well, nobody appreciates what I'm doing. I stay up late, I work on lesson plans, I make my room look nice for the kids to come in, I bring them things, I bring them snacks. But when they learn that math concept, when they learn that science or reading, whatever it is that you're doing with them, when they learn it, you think, well, this is what it's all about. Because when you get them, there are a lot of things that they don't know. There are a lot of things that they do know. But your job as the teacher is to facilitate their learning so that when they leave you, they know more than they knew when they came in.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about MPS now and what we're going through. And by the time this airs and into the times it will repeat, we'll be done with the first part of this. But there's been a lot of conversation lately about advanced ed and our accreditation. Can you tell us kind of where we are and what the next steps are on into the spring and actually even beyond that?
Sure. Well, as I came in during the time, I was the sort of just a person to kind of cover things for a minute. Maybe I thought for 2 or 3 months, and then I ended up being the permanent person. And so during that period of time, we had a special review by Advanced Ed, which is our accreditation agency. It used to be called SACS, and now it's called Advanced Ed. But so there were 6 priorities that they wanted us to address as a school district, school system. And so that's what we've been doing for the last few months. And so each one of those priorities had some directives. And so we kind of had a roadmap about these are the things that you need to cover, and these are the things that you need to get better at, and you need to show progress in these areas. And so it's not a check off, we've done all these things and now it's complete, but the progression of doing it the way that Advanced Ed wants it done. And these are really good things for our students. They're good for our board. They're good for our community. So there's nothing about it that's a negative sort of a thing. But it is an improvement model, and so but you continuously evolve in this model. So we've addressed all of the priorities and the directives. We, as of last week, uploaded our information, our report to Advanced Ed with attached documents that show that we actually did do these things, so that they're not just taking our word for it. And so around December 4th, they should be coming in next Monday, next week. They're going to be coming in and spending a few days with us. They're going to look at all of the things that we've sent them in writing, and they're going to conduct some interviews, and they're going to probably go out and visit some schools. So it's a trust but verify, which I believe in, kind of thing. And so when they do that, then they're going to, at some point, maybe it might take 2 months for them to give us a report back from our special review. But I feel really good about it. I think we've done what we need to do. We'll, at some point, probably within the next few months, get into the full engagement review, which is something you do every 5 years. But having gone through the special review, we should be well versed in how it's supposed to be done. And so we'll just continue on with that.
And even though we'll have this regular review, if you will, or the regular revision in the spring, that's not really even the end of it, because it's an ongoing process. They come in every 5 years, but they're always kind of looking over your shoulder and keeping up with what you're doing. So it's an ongoing process.
And you can't wait till the last minute to do it. You know, well, they're coming in 5 years again, so we'll just wait. No, you continuously work on student performance, the policies and procedures, revising those as needed, just all of those things that help make a school system top notch.
Right.
And so that's where we're going. We're aiming for that, and that's where we want to be.
And some of the things, well, not some, I guess all of the things that we do to help meet that accreditation standard could also apply to what we're working toward with our state intervention. Finance, student achievement, board policies and procedures and those kinds of things. How do you feel about where we are in our work to get to meet the requirements of state intervention?
I think we're moving in the right direction. Intervention sort of mirrors some of the things that Advanced Ed would expect of you. There are laws in place for school systems, let's say in the state of Alabama, that deal with, you know, certain kinds of financial issues, safety issues, student performance issues. And so as we're addressing Advanced Ed, we also have to address the things that are under intervention. I think we're moving in a really positive way with intervention. I think when I first became superintendent, we did not have our 16, 17, or 18 year budget done. And so in the last few months, and I came in June 1 as the official superintendent, but since June 1, we've completed all those budgets. We had an interim finance person who did a lot of that work, and then the new person coming in completed it. And so we also turned in our 2019 budget on time. And so that shows that we're moving in the right direction. We're not being stagnant. We're doing the things, and some things we're having to do rather rapidly. But when you're in a crunch, that's kind of what you have to do.
Exactly. And one of those, when you're talking about the budgets, and one of our biggest challenges, and one of the reasons that they came in with intervention was that 1 month operating expense. For the people who may not understand what that is and why we need it, would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Well, in simple terms, back during the time, when I was superintendent in another place, we had proration 3 years in a row. And so you had to have that reserve because you didn't know whether or not the state was going to give you a 10% proration after school started, and you already had people on board, you had things already going, so you had to have money. So it was put in place that you would have at least 1 month's reserve in case something happened that was an emergency. So we don't have that kind of an issue anymore because we have different funds now that have been set aside by the state so that hopefully we will not ever be put in proration again. But that rule is still in place about how much a system should have available, sort of like a savings account, so that if you do need it, you can dip into that fund and take care of any emergency issue that might pop up. But you're expected to pretty much, if you have to take some out, you have to get it back in there pretty quickly.
And for us, a month's operating expense is about 18.5 million.
Somewhere around there, yeah, about 18.5, somewhere in that range.
People don't realize it, but Montgomery Public Schools, we're the last time I checked, but we were the third largest employer in the area. We put a lot of money into the system, into the economy, not to mention the fact that our work is to help prepare the future employees for their role in society and their role in economics. And there's been a lot of talk about the career tech path. And we have an excellent career tech program. We talk a little bit about what's available?
Yes, we have of course, our center, Impact for Career Tech, but of course we need to do a little bit more work because of the college and career ready aspect. And so we're trying to pump that up a little bit more so that we have more students who, if they decide they don't want to go to college, but they want to stay in Montgomery, that they are ready for some career path outside of going and getting a college degree, that they can be craftsmen, they could be tradesmen and women, and that they're ready to go into some of those areas. I mean, I think the city will always any city tries to recruit different companies to come in to work. So there's a workforce development piece that goes along with that, so that you have skilled people who are able to learn a new craft, perhaps even when they leave high school. And so that's the other part of what we need to be able to do, is to have our students ready for a career path, even though it may not be going to college and becoming an engineer or becoming whatever. But at the same time, we want our children to be able to go to college and perform well when they get there and not have to take a lot of remediation classes and things like that. So that college and career path that we're looking at is really designed not only for the children who will go to college, but also those who will go into some career and maybe remain in Montgomery to work in some industry.
And actually our career tech programs are set up not only for people who just want to go to work, but also for those who are looking for additional training. You mentioned an engineering student could learn a lot in our career tech programs that would give them a foot up on their applications in college.
Right.
But there are so many more pathways, I guess, available now. When I was a kid back in the 1970s in high school, nobody told me that if I became a welder, I could make over $100,000 a year. I didn't know that, of course, but now we do. Certain skilled trades can do better than your average doctor, lawyer, or Indian chief, if you will. And so it's an important thing for parents to consider as they're talking to their children about their futures. And not everybody wants to go or should go to college, but MPS has a training program no matter which way you want to go. Tell me a little bit more. We just have a few minutes left. Tell me a little bit about your job. If somebody says, "What do you do, Dr. Moore?" Can you give us the short version?
Oh, I don't know if there is a short version, but I'll try. Okay, so I think just a superintendent in general. First of all, you have to know about the academics of training and helping students become educated in the academics. And then you have all the state and federal laws that you have to make sure you are abreast of and that you comply with as an educational institution. And then you have all the PR work, and you have the working with different ones in the community. And then you have to have those good interpersonal skills so that when you're dealing with teachers or principals or parents or children, that you can flip back and forth between those groups of people. And so you're always on your P's and Q's, as they say, because you're flipping from one arena to the other all day long. I mean, and then even if you have to deal with law enforcement sometimes, or the Justice Department, or local rules and regulations, and trying to help everybody understand what it is that has to be done at a certain moment in time. And so it's not all about, as a superintendent, it's not all about reading and writing and arithmetic. That's a big, big piece of it. But as a superintendent, I mean, you have to answer and respond to problems and issues. And so you have to be able to just kind of move around like that mentally all day long, and a lot of times physically. You have to get yourself from one place to the other, and you have to change from thinking this way to what do I have to do now that I'm in this arena? What do I do, and how do I deal with the issues and the people that I'm going to be talking to? And then, of course, you do television interviews.
Yes, you do.
Well, I mean, just a little bit of everything.
It amazes me because you have to be versed in budgeting. You have to be versed in personnel and how to deal with personnel, the legal issues that you mentioned. A lot of people just think it's about making sure the kids can read and write. Well, there's a heck of a lot more to it than that.
Right.
You have to understand transportation and what the issues are there and the law there. It is not for the faint of heart.
Right. It's like running a little city. I mean, we have about 4,000 employees, and so some cities don't even have that many people who live there. And so that's how many. So I tell people anything that happens out in society can happen within the ranks of our employees, and then with our students, 28,500. You know, so on any given day, you never know. And the biggest thing is the weather. You know, how do you call it? Do you say I'm going to have school today or not? And that's one of the hardest things that a superintendent has to do is to decide. But you always decide on, you look at safety,
Right.
and try to make a decision about what you need to do.
That's one of those things where you're darned if you do and darned if you don't.
Exactly.
But you were, one of the things you have to be able to do is know how to go to meetings. And
Yes.
how to run meetings.
Yes.
How many meetings do you have on your average day, do you think?
3 to 4
Oh, you have more than
for
that.
various reasons. And sometimes it's with one person, and sometimes it's with several. So it's part of the work, so you don't necessarily always look at it as
Right.
a meeting, but maybe a planning session or somebody giving you an update on something that you've been dealing with for several days or several weeks. And so, yeah, a lot of contact with people all day long.
And then working with the board, that is an art form in itself because you have, in our case, 7 individuals who have their own way of looking at things and their own ideas about things, who have to try to work together as a group. And you're officially the secretary of the board, but you do a lot more than just officially keep up with what's going on, don't
Right.
you?
Right. I think as a superintendent, you know, with us here having 7, you have to. I always make it a practice to, over time, get to know how board members think in a way, and that way, when you're dealing with any issues or just general day-to-day things that might pop up, you have an idea of how a certain person on the board will approach it, their thought processes about it, what's the hot button for them, what is it that they want to see happen. You know, some are into equality and justice for everybody. Some are into following the proper protocol. Some are into, I just need to know as much as I can know about this. And so you even when I ask our staff to give a report, I say, now, make sure you touch on all these things so
Right.
that you answer these questions for the board members as you are making your report. And that kind of helps to make things run a little bit smoother. Of course, as a superintendent, you're responsible for day-to-day operations, and board members are responsible for policy and procedure. And so sometimes there's a little bit of an overlap in that, but the big deal is the superintendent, for the most part, will know as much as all of those things are that you mentioned before, and board members won't know. And they don't have to know
No.
those things. They should, depend on the professional superintendent to be able to deal with those things. But then, of course, you have to keep them as informed as possible as you work through all of these issues.
But we just have a minute or so left. I wanted to ask you two final questions. Number one, what is your least favorite part of your day as superintendent?
I don't know if I have a least favorite. I'm not a very controversial type person, but I know how to deal with controversy, and I think my demeanor helps me filter through whatever the controversy might be, because I know that's going to be a big part of it, and I have to work it out. I think, once I get in and it gets rolling, I just kind of go with the flow.
Well, then, what is the favorite part of your day?
When I can resolve something, whether it's a kid who doesn't have a backpack, or whether it's some personnel issue. It can be so simple or it can be very complicated. I feel good about just resolving things, and then at the end of a day, if I've resolved 15 or 20 issues, then that says to me, it's like a pat on the back. You took care of all that, because tomorrow you're going to have some other things that pop up.
And tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow,
Exactly.
and tomorrow. That's
Exactly.
It's never a dull moment, is it?
Exactly.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time from your schedule to be with us today. And I'd just like to say that I'm excited that you're here. You have an incredible personality. You've got wonderful leadership skills. And I'm not saying that just because you could fire me. It's because it's the truth. And we're very lucky to have you here in Montgomery. So
Well,
thank you.
And I enjoy what I do. So that's the big part of it. You have to like it.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you being with us this fine day, and we hope that you'll go to our website, engageeducateinspire.org, to find out more about MPS, and we'll see you next time on Education Roundtable. Have a great day.